Good evening. I'd like to call to order this special town council meeting for Thursday, April 14th, 2022 on the fiscal year 22-23 budget. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson.
Present.
Carmody.
Here.
Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Marone. Tata.
Here.
Testa. Zandri. And Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Why don't I just go through the role of the departments and see if anybody can be sent home early. Do we have questions for the Public Utilities Commission? No? So this is just the three-member commission, okay? It appears not, but I'm sure you're staying anyway, Mr. Beaumont. Yes. Questions for the Electric Division? We have questions for the Electric Division. Water Division? Yes. Sewer Division? Yes. Finance? Yes. Capital Appropriation Reserve? Well, you're here anyway. And Debt Services, you're here anyway. So, all right, first up then is the Electric Division, page 67 for those of you following at home. You just remind us who you are for the record, please.
Tony Bucari, General Manager, Wallingford Electric.
Richard Hendershot, Director of Public Utilities.
Mary Ann Dill, Business Office Manager at the Electric Division.
Thank you. So can you summarize what's different about your budget this year?
Sure, I'll just go through some notable expenditures in the this year's capital budget. We have a $200,000 project to implement transmission line relay upgrades for NERC and NPCC compliance. These projects are done together with Eversource on our transmission line relaying. We take care of the ends in our substations in coordination with the remote ends, which are Eversource substations. We have we've estimated $250,000 for the engineering and permitting of a 115 kV lattice tower replacement. That is a transmission tower that we have in our system. It is the last remaining lattice structure in the system. We had an analysis done on the structure. There's some deterioration on 2 of the 4 foundations, and some of the members, the steel members on the structure are deteriorating. Eversource is currently in the process of replacing one of their structures in Wallingford, and now it's the time to do it. So we have dollars in the budget for the engineering and permitting, and then in the following year we would put in the dollars to replace the structure. We have $125,000 in there for a substation capacity analysis, and that's basically to look at the 3 substations that serve Wallingford, the available capacity, where it is, and whether or not we need to do a capacity addition in the near future. Capacity additions take time and cost, depending on the size, can cost a significant amount of money. And it's good to do the studies and get ahead of it because of the amount of time it takes for permitting and construction. We also have $155,000 for overhead distribution system reliability projects. These are projects we're undertaking based on analysis we've done on our circuits for outages and things to help minimize the customers impacted during outages and provide for isolation with switches to minimize the impact and duration when there are outages. There's $290,000 for underground system reliability upgrades. This is for replacement of direct buried cable, addition of some underground, some risers, and some switch reconfigurations that'll help improve reliability and resiliency. And then we have dollars in the budget to replace one of our pole setting trucks, a digger derrick. We look at all of our fleet on an annual basis, and we have one of our digger derricks. It's the oldest vehicles, one of the oldest line trucks in our fleet. We have 2. Oftentimes, depending on the complexity of a pole set, if it's what we call in the industry a cut and kick, where you have to install the pole in the exact location, the same hole, because there's steel risers that feed customers on it, you need 2 diggers, one to hold the old pole and move it, and the other to set the new pole. So it's critical that we have 2 functioning digger derricks at all times. So those are the notable large expenditures that are kind of outside of what our normal work is.
Thank you. Councilor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, just thanks for all you do. We have the best electric anywhere, and everyone always raves about it and moves to town because of it, so I just want to say thank you. But also, I noticed on line 920, it looks like your salaries went down significantly, and I was just wondering what is the reason for that? I mean, it's good, I'm not complaining, but just curious. Looks like it's page.
Yeah, so that's just, that's the administrative and general expense account. And what we do, every year we take a look at where everybody's time is distributed. That was just a reallocation of my time instead of putting all of it in A&G, because I do get involved in several projects. We redistributed my time to hit some of those other project accounts.
Okay.
So it went down there, but it went up in
Somewhere
other
else,
areas,
okay.
correct. Yeah.
Okay, sure. All right, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, because I couldn't follow that, line 920 appears on what page?
69?
Okay, I see that there. Okay, thank you. Now I know where we were. Okay, thank you. Looking at line 454, which is on page 67, which is rent from electric property. I'm looking at the projection. So last year there was a request of 91,000, and that was approved. And that would have indicated a decrease from the prior year. But then I look at least a half year, and it's a fraction of that. So what would that attribute? It's 13,000, just for the record.
So yeah, last year it was 132, and we're saying that now it's, we're asking for 90.
Last year, year ending, you were appropriated 132, but the number came in at 106. And then in the current year.
It's the previous year.
Oh, okay, sorry, okay. That's for pole attachments. the fees that we charge for third-party attachments on our poles.
Okay, so understanding what it is, why are we like at 10% of what we had projected? Because this is revenue. So last year, when we had the budget, we approved 132,000. And I'm looking at, through a half a year, you're at 13,000.
Yeah, they get billed, I think it's just a matter of when it gets billed. It gets billed in June once a year, so it's not something that comes in every month. The largest parts come in at a certain time. It's not, we don't send a bill for those attachments every month, so
Why not?
it's just the way it's been structured forever.
Yeah, they're annual fees, and just administratively, it would be difficult to do.
Well, why would it be difficult? I mean, why would it be difficult to, I mean, do we potentially have a benefit of getting the money sooner? I mean, a
It's
dollar
not-
today is worth,
Yeah, but it's, in the greater scheme of things, it's not a tremendous amount of money given the overall revenues of the division.
okay, it's 132, well, we'll get to the next
Yeah, I
question.
mean, if we were to change, there's specific pole attachment agreements with all of the attachers. You know, we are either owner, you know, custodian or joint owner of the poles with Frontier. And then every other attacher, fiber companies, Comcast, Light Tower, they all negotiate agreements with us. It's pretty standard language. If we were to change the payment arrangement, those agreements would all have to be restructured.
Understood, but at some point, those payment arrangements are going to come up for renewal, right? And that would be the opportunity. I'm not suggesting that you tomorrow renegotiate.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Correct.
But, you know, I'm trying to figure, you know, because you negotiate these things, there's things you deal with. Is it of potential benefit to the division to have this paid on a monthly basis to get paid sooner, right? I would think it is, but I throw it out there. We don't have a lot of power over what you guys do, but
I'd have to revisit, we would have to revisit the agreements and see if the language allows for that, if it's a standard practice that's typically done. You know, the other parties have some say. I mean, these have been going on for a long time.
And it's like a statewide thing too. I don't think it's.
We don't want to vary too much if the typical billing structure is annual as opposed to monthly.
But if we have no idea.
As I sit here right now, I just can't recall.
Agreed.
Right.
So I don't
Yeah, we could look.
want to vary. I don't want to be so different, but I'm not hearing that this is what everybody else does, right? So for all we know, everyone else bills monthly as we sit here tonight.
I don't know, so.
Agreed.
So
I don't either.
No, we can look into that.
So just to put it in context, though, I'm told by the comptroller, it's 0.02% in terms of against total revenue. Isn't that it?
It's it's not even 1% of their revenue. Sorry. It's less than 1% of their revenue.
Understood. Doesn't necessarily make a bad practice good, but, you know, as I said, we don't have a lot of power over what you guys do. I'm just throwing it out there based upon what is before us. So moving forward, on line 69, well, it's line 408, which is on page 69. I'm looking at the taxes, and that's all it says for the line anyway. And just to look at this historically, what was appropriated last year, and these are paid taxes, was 2.2 million. And through half year, it appears that you've paid 1.3. So assuming that the other half of the year, because taxes are not season, I mean, they're not based upon seasons of fluctuations for the most part, that line would fall outside of budget based upon what I'm seeing. So, because if I took 1.3 and I doubled it, it would come to 2.6 and not the 2.2. Why the variance?
Mary Ann, those are the gross earnings taxes.
The two items that are on the tax line are our gross earnings tax and the property taxes that we pay to the town of North Branford.
So the North Branford taxes are paid twice a year. So,
Looking at where our revenue is. Would have to look at that probably a little bit closer because there's certain customers that have gross earnings tax and certain customers that do not. And I can't tell by looking at this which sales would, the gross earnings tax would apply to and which sales they would not apply to.
okay, so when you say certain customers, just because, please educate me, how would that,
Manufacturers are exempt from paying the gross earnings tax on electricity.
okay, how does that apply to where we are and what we're doing?
Well, we factor that into the rates and don't collect it from manufacturers.
Okay,
And then we keep track of the sales per customer type and class, report that to the state, and then pay our gross earnings taxes appropriately.
the way it lies in the budget, it appears to me to be an operating expense, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So the gross earnings tax, how does that apply to the division and what the division pays as an operations expense?
Ask my accountant to answer that question.
The gross earnings tax is billed, so you're seeing the gross earnings tax.
If you could get closer to the microphone, please. Thank you.
You're seeing the gross earnings tax on the revenue lines, it's within the revenue, but then it's also where we remit it back to the state, it's coming out on the taxes line.
Okay, so you're going to do some research and figure out, okay.
I'll get back to you I'll write up something that explains the variance.
Thank you, it would be very helpful. The last thing that I had on electric is line 411, which is titled Gain Dispose of Utility Pit. It appears that we appropriated $15,000 last time. Your expenditure, at least through half a year, was $10,756. So the first question is, are there additional expenditures that would go into this line? And the second question is, why no appropriation for this budget?
It's actually gains disposition of utility plant. It's revenues realized when items of utility plant are sold. Is this
Okay.
Yeah,
Is this where the
this is-
scrap metal is?
Correct. This is when we discard of something that is either obsolete, we no longer use, it's sold. And we budget for it when we have things, items that we're no longer going to use that are obsolete. And in this upcoming fiscal year, we did not budget for it. We don't have anything that we're planning to.
Okay, understood. And when we walked into last year's budget, you said, hey, we might be selling that thing.
Right.
And
Right.
let's budget for it.
Correct.
Fine, okay, thank you, that's all I had, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Allenson?
I do just want to remind everyone, mostly the public, I guess, that if we were to bill more often on something that we are now only billing annually, it does cost money to do that. We have to pay somebody to essentially
stuff envelopes if we're not on EFT, and the administrative costs can be quite high. So we either bill them once a year for small amounts, or for larger amounts, or we bill them more frequently and then lose the money in payroll and benefits. So I did just want to bring that up as in considering the amount, and if we're splitting it between 6 companies, when your companies are very large, $20,000 is not worth paying somebody to administer checks more than once a year. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Councilor Laffin.
That's what I was just going to say. Just if it's not a cash flow issue, it probably would cost more money to manage it on a faster scale, and I think the other companies would feel the same way. That's all. Thanks.
Councilor Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening. My question's a little bit off budget, but it would, I think it would pertain to the budget ultimately. I had a question. I'm familiar with how ISO New England had alerted folks that there would be the potential for power shortages and even an emergency or an energy emergency here in New England, and that utilities would need to take the proper step to shed load and potentially even have rotating outages throughout all of New England. And I wasn't quite sure how that might impact Wallingford, and I was curious if you could, explain that to me.
Sure, yeah, we are in communication with ISO and all of the other utilities in the state, and we do have plans in place that we look at and refresh annually. There's annual load shedding exercises that we perform. And Rick and I, and Alex, our chief engineer, and our distribution superintendent, attended a recent exercise with Eversource. It was facilitated by Pura, Eversource, UI. All the utilities were invited to attend and listen. There was a lengthy discussion on, the potential reasons why something like that may occur and the plans that are in place to address that. And we do have plans in place. It would all be done through communications with ISO New England on the amount of loads to shed, at what time they needed to be shed. And we have plans where, we would shed a certain amount of load, a certain percentage, and then how to bring that load back and shed additional load. So it is something that is looked at. And
okay, that's good to hear. Just as a follow-up, you don't foresee any additional costs in terms of the training and preparation?
No, it's something that we prepare for and exercise annually,
okay.
So.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And for the folks watching at home, although a disaster could happen at any time that might require such a thing, the scenario that ISO was worried about and better publicized this year was winter loads and constraints on the gas pipelines.
Right.
As I'm sure everybody knows, the majority of electricity in New England is generated through the combustion of natural gas. But even though they've added a lot of power plants with natural gas, they haven't built any gas pipelines. So the infrastructure to deliver the natural gas to the power plants has not increased, while the number of power plants burning natural gas has. So that was the concern. And ISO shone a brighter light on it this winter than they have in previous ones. For no small reason, probably because of what happened in Texas a year or so ago. And luckily, their worst fears did not come true. So.
That's great. No, and thank you for that information. And I have one more question that's separate from that. I'm just curious what the electric division is doing in terms of energy efficiency and green initiatives throughout our community to help reduce load within our community and make things a little bit more energy efficient in town.
Yeah, we have an energy efficiency program. We work with the community. We do a lot of home energy audits for residential customers. We do a lot of larger scale lighting upgrades for manufacturers and factories. We do process equipment upgrades, and we have funding for those projects. HVAC, heat pump, hot water heaters, any of those upgrades, we've on a monthly basis, we're working with customers on those things. And we're looking at other opportunities. I know Pura is working with the IOUs on some different things. We just got an email on it yesterday about being able to comment on what's being proposed. And they are looking at other things. I mean, right now, I think, the whole LED lighting thing, it's pretty much saturated. Most people already have them, so it's like, okay, what can we do next? And that's what they're looking at. So we stay involved.
That's great. And not to put you on the spot, do you have any sense of, over the years that you've had these energy efficiency programs, how much folks have saved within our community? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah,
We
prepare an annual report. I just don't have it off. That's not something I have off the top of my head.
Well, I'll track it down. So
Sure.
Thank you for your answers. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So we moved into a house new to us, old by most standards, and we had an energy audit last week. And they came through and sealed doorways, and we have 100-year-old windows with steel frames, and we told them not to waste a lot of time with those. But they were able to make a difference in terms of sealing up the house of about, I'm going to dare venture to say about 20 to 25%.
Right. Yeah, they did the door blower, and they did the before and after. Yep.
Yeah, I showed up during it, and I thought our front door had been wrapped for Christmas. And so, and then light bulbs, I want to say they probably replaced 60,
right.
A significant number that were, much to our surprise, Edison-style light bulbs, and it's an old house.
Yeah. They make Edison-looking LEDs. I
They
have
do.
them in my house. They look
We have those.
Yeah.
So anyway, my curiosity is, how is that reflected in terms of funding? Is that something that we are required to fund because of regulation?
Correct.
And
we collect it in bills. We collect it every month, and then it's used to fund those programs.
And, Mr. Carmody, I can tell you that at our last house in 2010, we had an air conditioning system failure. And when we replaced about $16,000 worth of hardware and equipment, I want to say the credit we got back was approaching $3,000.
Yeah, probably.
So, and that's meaningful money. So I think it's a great program, and I encourage people to take advantage of it. Your house, you'd be surprised where energy is leaving your house, whether it's coming in, what you're spending on your electric meter, or it's leaky doorways. Right. So, thank you for that. I don't see any more questions from the council. I do see one member of the public, and I'll ask if there's any questions from the public. Guess not. ED, you're all set. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll get back to you.
Next up, the Water Division. And I think that means sewer doesn't require a change of personnel at the table, right? For those following at home, Water Division is page 73. Mr. Amwake, for first-time watchers, why don't you remind us who you are?
Thank you. Good evening. Neil Amwake, General Manager for the Town of Wallingford Water and Sewer Divisions.
And Mr. Hendershot has chosen not to abandon you. What's new?
So, we will go through some revenue highlights, then we will go through some operating budget highlights, and then some capital budget highlights for the Water Division. So the water consumption rate remains unchanged since June 1, 2015 at $4.09 per 100 cubic feet. For those of you at home, 1 cubic feet is 7.48051 gallons. The Water Division basic service fees remain unchanged since June 1, 2007. Billed consumption continues on a downward trend at minus 2.68% between fiscal year 21-22 and fiscal year 22-23, and how we project that is on a 10-year linear regression analysis. Moving on to operating expenses. So in the Water Division, the fiscal year 22-23 division includes retroactive wage increases for fiscal year 21, as well as negotiated wage increases for fiscal year 22-23 for water operations staff. The operating budget also includes retroactive salary increases for calendar year 21, as well as negotiated salary increases for calendar year 22, as well as calendar year 23 for management employees. So essentially, last year's budget did not have any wage or salary increases in it. And this year's future budget includes both retroactive as well as current wage and salary increases. So there is an increase there. Looking forward in the operating expenses, and I will refer to the last 3 digits of each account number. So looking at account 641, the Water Division staff continues to monitor chemical prices, specifically unit costs, as well as supply and delivery logistics for our water treatment plant. Looking at operating expense accounts 673, 675, and 677, the operating budget includes funding to repair water main, water service, and hydrant leaks discovered during the upcoming leak detection survey, and that leak detection survey is required per our diversion permit. Every 5 years, we need to conduct one. And then looking at operating expense account 923, the fiscal year 22-23 budget includes funding for our biennial regulatory dam inspections at the McKenzie Reservoir Dam, the Yulbrick Reservoir Dam, and the Pistapog Dam, as well as monies for a Water Division financial forecast and rate study. Moving on to capital accounts. Again, the last 3 digits, capital account 325. So we have an increased focus on proactive preventative maintenance at the Pistapog Water Treatment Plant and our raw water pump stations, both of which, all 3, Pistapog Pond, McKenzie Raw Water Pump Station, Yulbrick Raw Water Pump Station, and the Pistapog Raw Water Pump Station at this point are all 29.5 years old. So the pumps are original. They've been running for 29 plus years, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So we are looking at replacing one of the McKenzie raw water pumps at $43,000, plus replacing one of the Yulbrick raw water pumps at $36,000. Our ability to move water from McKenzie to Yulbrick to Pog is extremely beneficial. That is how we run our system. And then moving to capital line item 343, this is our water main replacement line item, and we have funding of $576,000 to fund approximately 700 linear feet of 8-inch water main along Ivy Street and approximately 550 linear feet of 8-inch water main along Parsons Street. And the last item in capital that I'd like to highlight is 346. You may remember earlier this year, both the Public Utilities Commission and the Town Council approved a budget amendment of $131,036 so the Water Division could go ahead and place an order for water meters. Right now with supply, it is a 9-month wait time. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any specific line item questions for you.
So the raw supply pumps caught my ear. So a $30,000, $40,000 item, can you expect to get 30 years out of that again?
We do. That's why they're built. I mean, this is, you buy a pump that's going to last that. We have pumps at the wastewater treatment plant that were installed in 1987 that are still working very fine. You know, honestly, they don't build things like they do anymore. So when you specify a new pump today, you make sure you get something that's going to last. Now, in those 29 years, we have done proactive maintenance on it. But when we look at it from a risk potential, when you have only 2 raw water pumps at Mackenzie or at Yulbrick, and you have a primary pump and you have a backup, you have a spare, it's prudent to replace one. So Mackenzie, we're asking to replace one in fiscal year 22-23, and then we will replace the second one in fiscal year 23-24. Yulbrick, we are asking to replace one in 22-23. We will skip a year, and then we will do the second Yulbrick one in 24-25.
From an amortization perspective, that's kind of impressive, because you can pay that money for a car, and you're not going to get 30 years of use out of it 365 days a year. So I just think that's noteworthy, and obviously your maintenance program is important. So, Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for water and sewer, but it's kind of the same question, so maybe I could just ask it once. So the lines that kind of caught my eye on each of them are the net income or loss lines. Both divisions are showing a net loss. Sewer division greater than water division, which I assume is because of the Phosphorus project and all the construction, but I just wanted to ask about the loss, and it looks like each year, at least I'm looking at water division right now, it looks like it's getting progressively a bit worse maybe each year over the past few years. So is that something you're concerned about, or what the reasons for that are?
You give me 30 seconds.
Oh, of course.
I do have a chart on this. I just need to figure out what folder it's in.
Yeah.
At the risk of stealing Neil's thunder, recall that one of the things he highlighted in the expenses of the water division was a financial forecast and rate study. That's in acknowledgement of what you just pointed out, that the division shows a net loss. It has sufficient cash to more than make up the difference, but that's not sustainable. And so looking to analyze that financially.
So I interpret the question differently, so let me see if I'm understanding it. Are you talking about the appropriation from cash and the appropriation to cash?
No, I'm looking at, for example, for water division, line 75, so the net income, well, it's a net loss. And then for sewer, it is line 80 in the budget. It's showing a net loss of over $3 million.
Okay, correct. So, and I'm jumping down several lines to that after depreciation, contribution and age, and I focus on appropriation from cash or appropriation to cash. So one of the things you need to remember is that we fully fund for 100% occupancy of our positions. So all our wages, our salaries, our benefits, including healthcare, as well as our pension obligations are fully funded. So that is what is driving a large portion of that net income. In reality, we do have vacancies. Right now, as of this morning, of 68 full-time equivalent positions in the water and sewer divisions, we have 13 vacancies. So that is 20% of our staff. So we are operating at 80% before we have anyone call in sick, before we have anyone take a vacation, before anybody is on light duty for worker compensation. So when you factor in appropriation from cash or appropriation to cash, since fiscal year 16-17 through fiscal year 21-22, the Water Division has ended its audited budget with an appropriation to cash. So I see your point, Councilor Tata, but it doesn't scare me because I think you have to look forward at, and don't forget, our operating budget, whatever we don't use in operating budget automatically rolls forward to retained earnings. There are specific line items in both the Water Division and the Sewer Division and the Electric Division that on July 1, we submit a purchase requisition and get a purchase order because we need to be able to react in case there's an emergency. So there are some, it's not a lot, but it is out there. But what is driving that is we allocate for full staff, we allocate for healthcare, and then at the end, if we don't have those, if we don't fill those positions, that goes back. So I see your point. It's, on paper, it looks concerning, but I think you have to go back retroactively and look at the audited, and I actually have that spreadsheet. And conservatively, since fiscal year 10-11 all the way through fiscal year 21-22, with the exception of fiscal year 15-16, the Water Division, through our audited budget, has always returned money to the retained earnings. And I will point out fiscal year 15-16 was the unique net pension liability adjustment. And that hit all three divisions. Did that answer your question?
No, absolutely. Okay. I think now that you point out going to the next page, that, yep, totally makes sense. So I appreciate that. And then I also just wanted to make a comment. I know, I think 2 times now I've gone on a tour of the sewer construction, and those have been, it's funny, I said it both times when we go, but you know, things you take for granted, like you flush your toilet and you don't think about it, but there's so much that goes into that, and seeing all of that and your knowledge and the staff there, and I mean, you know about engineering, you know about the accounting, you know about everything, and so I just really appreciate it. I know it's, you know, sewer division is probably not the most glamorous job, but you know, just seeing the plant and seeing everything that goes into that is it's fascinating to me, and there's so much that goes into it, so we'll appreciate your hard work for us.
Thank you, and I will pass it along to both staffs.
Yes, please do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? Questions from the public?
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Liu, Curtis Avenue. Just quickly follow up, caught my ear on the water mains, Ivy and Parson. Can you talk just a little bit about what's happening there? And just out of curiosity, understanding, as you project going forward, how do you determine which water mains are coming up? Or is it just more of an incident that gets replaced?
Great question. No. So how we determine what water mains come up is our engineering section has built a matrix for the water distribution system within Wallingford to decide which water mains to replace. That is based on the age of the pipe, the material of the pipe. There is break history in there. We also look at the acidity of the soil as well. So there are multiple factors that go in, and then each year we revisit the ranking. We actually can tell you what water mains we're going to replace for the next 20 years.
So that's a fairly standard cost. I expect you would see something like that every year because there's always a water main that needs to be replaced.
There is, and what we're previously, when I first started in 2016, every year, for lack of a better phrase, it was a knee-jerk reaction to fund water mains at $1.25 to $1.5 million per year in capital. Flash forward, we now have 4 major infrastructure elements of the Water Division that are now 29 years old. So including tanks, other pump stations. So the Water Division is still committed to replacing water mains every year, but to maintain that $1.25 to $1.5 million funding level every year, we weren't getting to other items. So we will continue to replace water mains, but we are also factoring in what other asset management obligations we have.
Great, thanks. Wanted to ask a little bit about phosphorus. I wasn't sure where to see that in the budget here. Can you point me?
So that's a sewer division item.
Correct.
Which, and we're in the
Come
water
back.
division.
Should I come back?
Do you
Sewer's
want
up.
to, I mean, we haven't
I'll
looked at
stay.
that part of the book yet.
Yeah, all right. I'll come back up. Thanks.
Any other questions for water? Moving on to sewer. It's page 79 for those of you following at home.
Okay, so again, we will take a look at sewer revenue highlights, then we will look at sewer operating budget highlights, and then highlight a few items in the capital budget for the Wallingford Sewer Division. So there will be an increase of sewer rates for bills rendered on or after July 1, 2022, as adopted by the Public Utilities Commission. The usage charge increases from $6.24 to $7.02 per CCF, or per 100 cubic feet. The basic service fee increases from $24.28 to $25.34 per quarter for a 5/8 inch meter customer. And I will point out that 95.73% of sewer division customers are that 5/8 inch meter size. So the amount of increase for median usage for a 5/8 inch residential customer is equal to $10.32 per quarter. Similar to the water division, billed usage continues on a downward trend at -2.72 between fiscal year 21-22 and fiscal year 22-23. Again, we use a 10-year look back for a linear regression analysis. Moving on to operating expenses. The fiscal year 22-23 sewer division budget includes retroactive wage increases for fiscal year 19-20, 20-21, and 21-22 for our operating staff. The current collective bargaining agreement expires June 30, 2022, so no future wage increases are reflected in the fiscal year 22-23 sewer division budget for our operating or clerical staff. In addition, the sewer division budget includes retroactive salary increases for calendar year 21 and negotiated salary increases for calendar year 22 and calendar year 23 for our management employees. So again, a portion or a majority of the line item to line item year-over-year expenses are wages, salaries, and associated benefits. Continuing on with our sewer division operating expenses, line item 641. So projected additional chemical usage due to the new tertiary phosphorus treatment process in conjunction with unit cost increases. Line item 645, an increase in sludge transportation and disposal costs due to both an increase in the volume of sludge produced due to the tertiary phosphorus treatment process and an increase in the transportation and disposal unit costs. Moving on to the capital projects, in line item 331, we are requesting $80,000 for upgrades to the existing primary settling tanks to provide food In sewer parlance, that is biological oxygen demand for nitrogen and phosphorus biological removal processes. This will enable the Wallingford Water Pollution Control Facility to make our own food versus purchasing a BOD source such as methanol. Wallingford's wastewater treatment plant uses a biological nitrogen and phosphorus process. Like humans, the bacteria need food. We can either buy it. Methanol is the common on the mark over-the-counter purchase. We think by changing some of our piping around in the primary settling tanks, we can reduce that need to buy an outside source for food. So this is projected to lower our nitrogen effluent levels, as well as reduce the amount of chemical needed to be purchased for the tertiary phosphorus treatment program. We think this has a great return on the investment. And the last capital item I will highlight is line item 343, collection system lining at $250,000 and manhole lining repairs at $75,000. So we continue to dedicate funds towards sanitary sewer pipelining, as well as repairs to our sanitary sewer manholes to tackle inflow and infiltration concerns. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So how common is it for a waste management division to make its own internal product like that?
So we are unique in the type of treatment process we have. We have a biological phosphorus and nitrogen process. Most wastewater treatment plants use an activated sludge process. So the 56 rotating biological contactors that we have at the Wallingford wastewater treatment plant are unique. So I'm not aware of any other plants in the state that would do this. We've talked it over with our sewer superintendent, has some great ideas, got some input from our senior operators and our chemist, and ran it by our consultant as well.
It's impressive. Thank you. I think I had questions from Councilor Tata and Councilor Fishbein.
Mine were already answered in the
And prior.
previous department, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fishbein.
I have a similar chart for sewer.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you. Looking at on page 80, line 926, which is titled Employee Pensions and I think it's supposed to be Benefits. Sorry. It appears that last year we appropriated or approved $343,000, but this year we're showing a loss. So what's that attributable to, or a negative $31,000?
You're on 926?
Yes, sir.
Okay, oh, so the loss in fiscal year 21-22 through January 31st, 21-22. So that is vacancies. That is, we are currently have no assistant superintendent at the wastewater treatment plant. We are down 2 operating staff, and the sewer division and the water division then both split 50-50 for our engineering and our business office staff. So we have not had a water sewer inspector since August of last year. Currently, obviously, our business manager, Brian Naples, was promoted to just recently, so it won't be reflected here, to deputy comptroller. We have a town clerk vacancy. So that is why that beginning of the year, we budget for full occupancy of our positions.
So I would expect, given the title of the line, that we would have paid something towards employee pensions and benefits since last July. So, but it's still showing a negative, right?
We do. I'm going to maybe see if the comptroller can assist me with this. So within 926, we have a line of benefits distributed. I would have to touch base with the business manager. And in that, we are showing a year-to-date negative of 477,695, but that's a granular financial accounting question that I'd have to follow up with Brian Naples, our former business manager, who's now deputy comptroller, and who could not be here with us tonight due to a family obligation.
So we're showing year-to-date a loss or a negative of 477,000?
No, so we are showing a year-to-date loss of 31,129. What is driving that in a specific line item by line item for that 926 account is benefits distributed, and that's a loss of 477,695. We've got Medicare and Fica expenses of 16,764. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of 177,401, pension contributions of 247,383, clothing allowance, some other smaller line items. When you add it all up, that is where we get the negative 31,129. I would need to follow up on greater explanation as to that benefits distributed line item.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just, because the way I'm looking at it, if you've paid out $1, it becomes 1. I mean, if you subtract the 1 from what was appropriated last year, then you might end up with a negative. So I appreciate.
It is, and I'll be completely upfront, one of my frustrations sometimes is that the public and the town council literally sees the summary for that account. What really is important is to understand the individual line items, but I will follow up on what that benefits distributed captures.
Okay, I appreciate that. So now shifting from the micro to the macro, it appears that the sewer division loses money, and it has. We projected it for it to lose money last year. We're projecting for it to lose money again this year. I'm comparing, and I'm on page 80. I don't know if you have what I have.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm looking at the operating income loss, that line, which is in the center, right? And I'm looking at the projection, which is 2.49. Okay, you see that? So now the next section is non-operating revenue. Okay, so if you already have a loss and you have revenue, I would think that any additional revenue would decrease the loss, right? That macroly makes sense. But when I take all of the positive numbers in that lower section, and no matter what they add up to, shouldn't the bottom number be lower than the middle number? But it isn't. It increases the loss.
One of the, if I may,
Sure.
Yeah,
there's a non-operating expense in there as well. So the
maybe
380,
that-
the 385 is a plus, the 989 is a minus.
This is a minus, yeah, the interest.
Yeah.
Okay, that would, okay, because they're all shown as pluses, but one is in effect a minus. Okay.
Oh, Tim.
No, that's why we're a team. That's cool. So, we're minus $3 million, that's the projection, and I think a portion of that, well, the depreciation expense, is that an actual expense or is it on paper expense? And I'm looking at line 403.
Correct. Yeah, that's a paper expense, and we are already starting to depreciate new infrastructure at the wastewater treatment plant because we've already paid for it and booked it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So, paper expense throws some of this stuff off. So if I was to take a $3 million loss and then take away that depreciation expense, because it's just on paper, then you are making money. Is that fair to say, or am I getting way too far into accounting here?
I think that's fair. What we don't have in here is the future bonding obligations. Am I correct, Tim?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. I'm looking at, still staying on this page, assuming that the depreciation expense is merely a paper expense, you want a viable company, so to speak, right? So you have income minus actual expenses is your net revenue. The depreciation expense is a vehicle of accounting. So if you took that out of the equation and you just did the simple math here, income minus operating expenses equals X, that's a positive number, not a negative number. That was my question, so.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's fine, cool.
It'd be about $1 million swing the other way.
Yeah, agreed, okay. That's the way I read it too, and thank you for that. The reserve for I&I, capital expenditure, line 81, how is that handled? So I know what the I&I is, we've been down that road, right? So, but I'm looking at the line, and there was a request of 50 grand last year, we approved it, but there's 29,000 through the half year. So I would have thought a reserve expenses goes to an account in the full amount. Why do I end up with a number that's something less?
Can you just clarify where you are,
Sure.
Counselor?
I'm on page 81.
Yep.
The second portion, the bottom portion, it's
Yep.
under use of funds. is
Use
the
of
line.
funds, yep.
It says reserve for I&I. And I'm looking at the 29,167 through a half year. If it's a reserve, I would have thought,
Okay.
Right.
I was one line item up. I'm sorry, I was at 13,992.
no problem.
So our I&I inspector is paid, a portion of that salary is paid for out of this line item. We have other direct costs associated with that I&I line item for materials we buy, postage, handling. So we will have expenses other than just reimbursement for I&I projects. Did I capture your question? I don't know if I did.
And I know I have problems with this structure because I think you guys are curtailed a little bit by what you can put in these categories. So I respect that. But I would think a reserve as titled is something you put aside in case you need it, and perhaps you draw against it. So there would have been an appropriation for I&I, and there would have been a reserve in case you go over that, is the way I'm looking at it. So I don't know, is the 29,000 what's left out of reserve? Or is it what's been expended out of reserve?
Actually, when I take a closer look at this, and again, I would want to double check with the business manager, a portion of the basic service fee from every customer every quarter funds our I&I reserve. So this may be the portion of I&I reserve funds that we have collected through January 31, 2022.
That would make sense, but then I'm looking at the title of the category. It's use of funds, it's not income. So, but we could be curtailed again. But I look for some sort of backup, or I appreciate the explanations and the discussion. So that's all I have, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else on the council? Mr. Liu?
Thank you, Jared Liu, Curtis Avenue. So I want to follow up on the phosphorus. Thank you. You started to answer first half of my question there. Where's the money from the state recognized here on the budget?
Well, so that is a funding ordinance, so it is not recognized. And again, I would rely on the comptroller. It is, again, I apologize. I'm a general manager, not a specific manager. I don't pretend to be an accountant. I believe that is a $60 million funding ordinance, and it is not recognized within our operating or capital budget. I think the operating and capital budget reflects cash. It's not a cash project. It's a bond project. Am I correct, Tim?
Yes.
And just perhaps a question for the comptroller then. How much are we expecting to get from the state for phosphorus?
That's a question for water and sewer, not.
So grant or loan?
The grant.
So our grant is 37.8102%, and right now our construction project is a little north of 46 million. We are at 45.686 million for construction costs. And in addition to that, we have our design fee plus our construction administration fee. So I don't know the final dollar value until we add up all the change orders, and the engineering consultant has a not to exceed fee. We are below on the design fee, and we will see where we end up in the construction fee. Right now, we are slated to end the construction phase of the project in August. It will take us several more months to close out the financials, and then we will have what they call a closing with the state, and we will basically convert from a construction loan to a mortgage, which is 20 years at 2% simple interest. So I don't have an exact dollar figure out right now. The grant is 37.8102%, and that's rounded down from 8 digits, 8 decimal places.
And obviously, we're talking about estimates, and these things can change as time goes on. But that 37 million, sorry, I think that was what you said, 37 million, will come out against the 60 million or so. So the cost to the ratepayers will not be 60 million. Am I hearing that correct?
Correct. So if you simply take the 60 million, multiply it by 37.8102, that which is the grant portion, hold on. I'm getting 22.686 million for loan.
Okay.
Maximum. No, I think you would have to go back to the funding ordinance of the $60 million. It included several line items, including contingencies. So whether or not we use that contingencies or need that contingencies, I can't answer at this time.
Okay. So if I'm hearing it correctly, the ratepayers are paying for the phosphorus now, but at some point, the money will come back from the state. How does that come back to the ratepayers later on? Are we expecting a massive reversal of bills, like there'd be a credit sometime 10 years down the line?
So let me back up a moment. So on the second business day of each calendar month by 12 noon, the Sewer Division submits a payment request to the State of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, including the contractor invoices as well as the construction engineer invoices. On the 13th calendar day of each month, through an electronic funds transfer, the town of Wallingford receives 100% of the requested amount. We then pay the contractor as well as the engineering consultant on the last Friday of each month. So essentially, right now, the state is floating 100% of our expenses. When we go to close the phosphorus project, or excuse me, the water pollution control facility upgrades project, the state will credit us for that grant, and then the loan will only be written for that loan portion.
Got it, okay.
So right now, there's no cash out of hand for the construction project.
And I saw that we're estimating that the average increase, or the increase to the average ratepayer, I forget exactly how it was phrased, where the average there was.
Median, it's not
Median,
average.
Thank you. Was about 10% increase.
I don't like percentages. We look at dollar values for 95.73% of our customers, and that's $10.32 per quarter.
Okay. I may have read it wrong. I thought that it was actually written up as 12.76%.
Correct. The mayor likes percentages. I don't.
Okay. So I guess my question there now is on the median customer. Is that who's generating the phosphorus? Who's subsidizing who here, right? Is the person, the median person, the person who is generating this effluent that is now having to be remediated, or is it coming from somewhere else that the ratepayers are now having to bankroll?
I do not know the source of the phosphorus within the collection system. This is a state requirement that Wallingford undertook to meet our National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit that is issued by the state under the guidance of the EPA.
And I think I'm asking as sort of a professional in the industry, is your sense, is your understanding that the majority of the phosphorus that's leaching coming from fertilizer, from manufacturing, from somewhere else?
I would not even hinder a guess.
Okay.
That is, nope.
Okay. And if it wasn't clear, what I'm trying to get at here is I'm trying to understand if the people who are paying are the people who should be paying. And it sounds like you're saying, we don't know, and so everyone will pay a balanced share.
I run a collection system and I run a wastewater treatment plant. I'm not worried about where this individual constituents come from. I mean, that's kind of like saying, quite frankly, who poops the most? I don't know how to say it. It floats downhill, it's conveyed downhill, we treat it.
So I also wanted to get a sense of, comparatively, where are we? And I saw that Southington, for example, fairly similar sized town to Wallingford, similar demographics, was saying that the cost of their phosphorus remediation was going to come out to be $38 million. Do you have any sense of why they're so much lower than we are?
I'm the general manager for the Wallingford Water and Sewer Divisions. I don't worry about other municipalities. We have a different plant, we have a different style. We had other upgrades that needed to be undertaken. I think that's an apples to orange comparison. Quite frankly, I don't worry about other municipalities. I worry about my business.
So would you say in this case, there's not a peer-to-peer communication?
I'm not interested in Southington, quite frankly. They run their business, I run mine.
Okay, that's all I have on phosphorus. One other question, which is, I was listening to you talk about the food and the supplies that are needed. Just curious, are there any supply chain issues that keep you up at night as you think about as the supply chain timeline gets longer and longer, and you think about, gosh, X, Y, or Z, not having that in the next 3 months would really bring things to a grinding halt? How much do we have on hand? Is there anything that you think now would be the time to put that in as an order?
So we look at that on a daily and a weekly basis. We look at our chemical usage, what our wastewater flows are. We do projections as to what our material and equipment needs are. That's just who we are. That's how you run both water treatment and wastewater treatment. I think that is why both the electric division ordered transformers early and the water division came forward to order $131,000 worth of meters early as well. You know, we track it. It's a changing environment. It's a changing commodities market as well. We have also put on a very large additional treatment system at our wastewater treatment plant. So we are getting used to what our chemical usage is. You know, the engineers can do projections, but that's based on an average projection. It has been a very wet spring. Right now, our flows are consistently over 7 million gallons a day. So you'd have a higher flow, you need greater chemicals.
Okay, thanks for your time and commitment.
Professor Amwick, thank you for showing us that you know your waste.
Thank you.
I think that's all we have for you tonight. Thanks to the rest of the public utilities people for sticking around.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I was going to skip to capital appropriation reserves since we're at the back of the book, but it doesn't appear to me that everybody's at the back of the book. Well, I am too. All right, well, that's capital appropriation reserve is page 89.
It's also the page that was sent out today, so it's in front of you with the correction.
Yep, we have it digitally. We have an extra paper page. What's the correction? It wasn't obvious for me.
I forgot to change the top portion. So where it says fund balance committed, it still had last year's numbers up there.
Ah,
Nobody reads that.
that's why it was corrected.
So I apologize for that.
All right. Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim, unfortunately, I have put a star next to almost every item on this page. So the revaluation. Now, understanding that these are items that were appropriated in a prior budget that we are proposing to carry over to this next budget. Fair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The revaluation at 116, that's a reserve for the next revaluation, right?
Yes, and we also use that while we still have some cases pending. So Janice might need some of the money for appeals on the revaluation that we just did.
And do we appropriate, you know, like, I know we do it with fire trucks, and I think we do it like this, where we say, you know, we're gonna need the money, so each year we're gonna take some money and put it towards this.
Correct. So right now, we have available to us the 116, 130. And in my finance budget, you'll see I'm requesting another 75,000. So we're trying to build it up to, so that there's not a cliff every 5 years when we have to do the revaluation.
And when do you appropriate the money that goes to that line?
That's what we're doing on this page.
Well, the reason why I ask, and I don't want to necessarily delve into another budget, but I have page 21 open, which is the same line. And that's the finance budget. And that indicates that there was no appropriation in the current year. So,
There was an appropriation in the current year on page 21. It just wasn't spent. So the money that was in last year's budget, we're asking for it to be carried forward on this page because it hasn't been spent yet.
okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. The network hardware software for the police, 65,000. Why hasn't that been done?
That would be a question for the police chief on their night. I don't know why they haven't spent that yet. They asked me to put it on this page because if it's not on here and they don't get it done by the end of the year, they would lose the funding.
Okay, is there a document that memorializes their request? You know, I would think that there could be appropriations that are approved in the budget that someone would want to, have whoever come before us again to have it reappropriated or something like that. So is there backup for why they haven't done it, or they just said, just put it on?
Usually in this process, while we're getting this page done, my initial look is to go through the departments that have capital to see if there's any items that haven't been spent. And then, I contact the department head, ask them what would they like to be carried forward and what cannot be done. So there is, I'm not sure if they emailed me or it was a phone conversation.
Okay, do we know how many years that's been hanging out there? Because
Oh, I believe that is just from the current year's budget, from the year that we're in. So I can try to flip to the police to see if it's sitting there.
well, I'll take the time, and I know the police will be before us, so
So I
I'll
believe
ask the
that
question.
is a budget, it's a live item in the 2022 budget that just hasn't been spent yet.
Okay, and then the fire department, I'm a little concerned if we appropriated money for a fire hose and it hasn't been spent yet. Any idea why?
So this is a recurring items of, it's a recurring capital item every year. So if they have money left over, they could always use to spend it, so they just ask to keep it forward, keep carried forward.
Okay,
So they'll, in their capital this year, there'll be a line item for hose.
even though they may not buy a hose.
This would be a question for them. I don't know how specifically what, if they're buying a specific hose or if it's the nozzles or, so they had money available that they didn't think they were going to spend by the end of this year, and they're just asking for it to be reappropriated so they can spend it next year.
So what's the harm in just having these things zero out and then just putting it in the current budget? Because the total of this page would go to the general fund, right? If budgetarily we said, no, nothing's going to be held over unless it's a severe thing. If you want it, ask for it in your present budget, and we will budget for it in the present. What's wrong with doing it that way?
We could do it that way, but these are what we're asking to be appropriated is the max number. So, for instance, if someone, like the pickleball court, we're expecting the pickleball court to be done. But just in case there's anything left, so say at June 30th, they spent $87,000, but there might be something else left that's done, then I would only carry forward the $3,000. So this page is the max of what they can spend, but some people spend the money as, we still have 3 more months, so they could spend it. So it's just in case.
But the other way of dealing with it, you would zero out that line, you would put in the present expenditures $90,000 towards the pickleball court. If the number comes in at 87, there's still $3,000. So I don't see the difference. I mean, part of the problem, I guess, doing this conceptually is you have a prior council that approved these programs, and now you're saying, well, it was approved before, we want to just carry it over, and that new council doesn't have the ability to address the merits of the project. Not that I'm saying anything about pickleball. I'm talking about the page in general. So I'm just trying to, why we do it that way, and I haven't heard anything at this point, and I see the mayor wants to jump in.
I think one thing is that would mean it all gets reappropriated in the tax rate.
Not necessarily.
That's what would occur.
Well, Well, that's a choice.
No, that's not a choice. If it's not carried over, that money has to be reformed, the revenue has to be repurposed, and depending upon how much you're using from reserves, is it in there or not? I mean, now you get into what should be the number for this versus the number for some other reserve.
No, it's very easy. So if you take a project that's $30,000 and it gets zeroed out, the money, the $30,000 goes to the general fund. If the administration is still in favor of the project, the administration takes $30,000 back out of the reserves that it just went into and appropriates the money. It's very easy.
Okay, but I think the larger issue here is, in the next several months, I suspect we'll hear from on maybe most of these, that the intention is to begin spending or even completely spend the money before the end of the fiscal year. The issue that Tim brings up is correct. So you get partway into the project and it isn't finished, but the money now is gone.
But if they
And
spend
now
it,
how do they complete the project?
if they spend it in this fiscal year, they already have the money.
Say that
We're
again?
talking about this money was appropriated last year. So this fiscal year will end June 30th. So they finish the project by June 30th, they already have the money. The problem becomes if they need money into the next fiscal year.
But then you budgeted this money to go back in the general fund when it won't necessarily, and then you additionally budgeted them new expenses that they might not necessarily need.
No, I disagree.
So that money can't be held on to, so the pickleball. So by June 30th, they've spent, out of the 90,000, they've spent 67,000. The next bill that comes in, now that has to all be, whatever they need has to be reappropriated because it ends with the end of the fiscal year. This would allow that to, they're going to begin before, but this allows that to be used in case it moves into the next year. The controller tells me there's no way to hold on to that at the end of the fiscal year.
Anything in the general fund that's unencumbered at June 30th lapses. You can't spend on it anymore. It automatically goes back into fund balance. So what this page is doing, and it never comes to this amount, you know, in the years past, what's before you is the max that could be carried forward. But some of this money is going to get spent before year end. And then what gets carried forward is what's left that hasn't been encumbered.
But, I mean, it's helpful if we think outside the box, because you can still do it under that scenario. So the year ends, they've only spent $60,000 of their $90,000, right? So now the $30,000 goes into the general fund. We have a contingency account in next year's budget. You come before the council, you say you approve this project, but because of the timing, we had to put this money into the general fund. Can you transfer the money out of contingency to complete the project? It's not, you know, you can't tell me that we can't complete the project. That's, you know, the sky is falling.
Yes. 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 The one, it would become, I would say, we do this for administrative ease on our part and your part. I mean, do we want us to come back before you with 15 separate projects because we're short of money that lapsed, and we need the tail end of it to complete?
I understand, but, you know, it is possible. It is not, and, you know, some of this stuff may not even get spent in this budget. It's just, it's difficult to deal with it this way up here. So
It could be they encumber it, so everyone will encumber, all the departments, I assume, where unless they absolutely are going to abandon one of these things, they'll encumber it. Otherwise, if we're setting the contingency, we'd have to be adding up, ideally, all of the ones we think that might go over, so we make sure we have enough money in the contingency to be able to handle that, along with all the other things that have to be handled in the contingency. So, you know, it's six and one half a dozen of another. Right now, this would appear to be a fairly streamlined way of dealing with it. But I suspect if this page disappears, my guess is the departments would encumber all of those then.
I believe that is correct.
Okay, but you know, and I don't want to belabor this, but you know, the $528 for nozzles and hose applications. I mean, you can put the thing on consent. It's good.
So on this page here, I can answer for my two items. The other ones I think are as appropriate for the department head who asked for it. So for the 116,130 for the revaluation, it's to try to smooth, you know, we're doing that so that we're evenly raising taxes instead of having a large item come through. So that's why that one. So if we get rid of this page, that's going to fall. We're going to have to reappropriate, you know.
I haven't suggested getting rid of the page, and I agree with that one, just
Okay.
just to be clear.
And now, this other item's been around for a while, this financial information system, and we're actually going to spend down on this. So our financial information system needs it's a required update, and we're going for a big leap, and it's almost going to be like we're having new software. So this money has been carried forward, and we sporadically use it for any time something for the system comes. We can now have funds for training. I think I'm going to have to train all our users on this new. So that's why that money gets carried forward. So instead of to have money there just in case the situation comes that we need training.
And that's exactly my point, because we have a contingency account. So, you know, I don't think you need that, but in your budget, the finance budget, there is a expenditure of $8,000 for software. So how's that separate and apart from this financial information system?
So the finance budget covers, you know, a lot of this building. I have 4 different offices I'm in charge of. The 8,000 for software purchase, that's for purchasing, needs to upgrade their, I believe it's their e-bid system. That's what that 8,000 is for.
Okay.
The financial information system is what we use up in finance. It's Munis, and that's our, you know, the reports that you guys get monthly. That's the system that's generating that. That does our payroll.
Okay. You know, when fire comes before us, I'll ask them specifically about those other items. But do you have any idea the Grand Street basketball court? I think that's been kicking around there for a little while too.
So I believe that's going to be done. They asked us to put it on here just in case the way the economy and timing, if it doesn't get done in time or encumbered in time, they don't lose the money.
Okay, and the Doolittle Park shade replacement, I know there was a bit of controversy over that in the past. Do you have any idea about the status of that?
I do not. You would have to
That's
ask
fair.
Recreation.
Okay, that's all I had on this particular one, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else on capital appropriation reserve? And the gallery's empty, so no questions from the public. Back to finance on page 20.
Would you like me to do a quick summary, or you want to just
Sure.
ask questions?
That'd be
or-
helpful.
Okay.
I'm sure there are questions. Otherwise, we would have sent you home.
All I'd have to say anyway. So there's a couple of line items that had some increases. I can go over our payroll increase for the same reason Neil was explaining. The clerical contracts settled, so there's 3 years of their raises now that are brought forward, and believe it or not, their contract is out, so there's no raises in this budget for that fiscal year. Management there's raises for management, but there's a half-year raise in there, because management's contract goes from January to December. So that, and I was talking earlier with some counselors, just to give you an update on our staffing levels. We are almost back to full staff. We are currently, finances, fully staffed. I am down in the assessor's office. The chief appraiser just got promoted to assessor, so I need to fill his position. And in tax, we're down one senior clerk due to a retirement. We are going through the interview process. It's been lengthy. The senior clerk position has vacancies in about 5 different departments, and we're all fighting over the same people. So
Sounds
that's
pleasant.
the increase in payroll. If you go down, the one that you're probably all eyeing is account 58735, which is operating expenses. I increased that by about 40,000, and that account covers all the postage and mailing for the entire town hall. It's the postage to mail out all the billings, dunning notices. It is also, let me just check my notes here, sorry. It pays for the mail room machines in there. We pay for the courier, the bank courier out of there. The copy paper for the mailroom gets paid out of there. The reason for the increase is with the way the economy has been going with banking fees. We used to earn enough interest that we wouldn't have to actually pay out the bank the fees. In the last couple of years, that has kind of flip-flopped on us. And I am not sure next fiscal year if I'm going to have enough interest to net the fees, so I put a little money in there just in case I have a bill to pay. The other item that has an increase is the accounting services, account 56724. That account is primarily used for temporary help for the assessor and the tax during their busy seasons. So twice a year in tax, we need extra help. And when the assessor's office is doing the grand list each year in the fall, they use that money as well. I put in there an extra 20,000 because there's a couple of new accounting standards that we need to implement with this next audit. And I believe we're going to need some help, some expertise with the accounting firm to implement that. So that's a quick summary.
Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim, on the postage expenses, have we looked into the money that we could save by just emailing bills?
I have not looked into that.
Okay. Is it something you'd be open to looking into?
If the mayor wanted me to go that route, I could look into.
Okay. Well, you know, it appears to me that every time we mail something out, it costs us 53 cents. And because of the back end, the sender back of a check has to spend 53 cents, that each one of those transactions costs $1. And I know that most of my bills, I get an email. And I don't know if it costs those providers, you know, something to send that stuff out, but it's an awful lot of money.
It's something I would be willing to look into under the direction of the mayor.
It can be looked into, but not everyone's going to take their bills with email, because, you know, some businesses will only do that, and you don't do business with them otherwise. We have to do business with everyone. So it's going to be a mixed bag of what works and what doesn't, which, you know, creates options. And what the expense is in order to maintain a dual system becomes another question, but.
Well, certainly, it would be an opt-in program. A lot of I think, our cable bill, we have the option of getting it by email or getting it in paper. And, the onus is on us to give them an email address that works and all of that. But if you figure if we have two customers and one gets mail and the other one opts for email, we're saving money on that individual.
Well, the other thing is, though, we often need to have the proof of what has been done. And, I know, I never got the email, I never saw this, I never saw that. When we mail out something, if it doesn't come back, we know you got it. So if it's a tax bill or whatever, it's the end of the story. But people change their email accounts, I suppose businesses can too. There's a lack of standardization that I think could be a potential problem. We can look into it, but it's that standardization that produces some efficiency too.
We also have the problem with the, at least recent, unreliability of the Postal Service. If you're saying that just because you didn't get the mail back, that's some sort of proof of something, I wouldn't rely upon that with my experiences, but certainly an email system, for those of us that use Outlook, you can send out read receipts with every email. So, you send out the email, the system says whether or not it was received, whether or not it was opened. I think that would be a much easier system to watch and to monitor than if the U.S. Postal Service sent us unreturnable mail back to us.
Well, I'm well aware of two arguments on this, and I know a variety of arguments that come about with email, but we can look into it.
No, I appreciate that, because I've been doing that for years, and I haven't had a problem, but anyway.
And if I may, we use a postal service, so we do save about 5 cents a parcel because we pre-sort the mail, so it gets sent to a pre-sorting thing before it gets to the post office. So we get, our postage is, not much, but we do get a 5-cent discount on our postage.
Yeah, I just think that, I think people would be willing to, pay 40 cents more.
I'll talk to some of my colleagues to see if anyone is using it and what it entails.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you. So looking at the microfilming line, 5600 or 56600. There was an appropriation of $10,000 last year, but it doesn't appear that you've used it. So what's going on?
Actually, I didn't have any money in last year's budget for that. So at the end of fiscal year '21, I came and asked for a transfer to have 2 years' worth of invoices filmed. And then last year, the year that we're in, I don't have any money for that. So I would like to, I'm asking for another $10,000 to get another year of invoices done.
Okay, so that's going back and creating an electronic copy of prior invoices.
Yes, so we're just running out of space to store it. So that's kind of.
And what do you do with the paper copies once you do that?
So if it's within the 7 years, we can get rid of it. So
if you.
We would have to, there's a state system to get rid of the records.
Yeah, so if you converted to a electronic system where you were sending out invoices electronically through email like we were talking about, would that get rid of the need to microfilm, or just up to a certain period?
This microfilming is for our copies of invoices that we've paid.
Oh.
To vendors, and it's about 20, I think it's 18 to 20 giant banker's boxes that for each fiscal year.
Okay, understood. The line 56726, personal property audit, money's been appropriated but not expended?
Those are from the assessor's office, and I think they do that towards the end of the year. So selected, I got notes for this. Selected business personal property accounts are audited through the assessor's office. Sometimes they focus on a particular industry. Sometimes if certain companies, looks like their declarations are lower than were expected, they'll focus on that area. So it's just so the assessor's office is just, they're doing audits of business to make sure we're capturing everything we're supposed to capture.
And you have experience of what that audit entails? I'm just trying to figure out what that line is for.
Can I answer that question at the next workshop? I'll ask the assessor.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll be here at every one, so I'll get more information for you.
It's supposed to be we've got a bunch of pages, you have no idea what we're gonna ask you about, and it's like, so no, I appreciate that.
And this is my first time doing this as well, so.
Is this line 726?
No, it's 56726. Well, so 726 is the last three, yes.
I believe that's an external audit where we do personal property audits on I believe it's a random, regular basis to make an effort to see that what's been submitted as far as inventory is accurate, and I believe that's what that is.
Yes, so it is, they'll hire someone to do it. So that money will get spent before this fiscal year's out.
Okay, I appreciate that for where we are presently. That's all I had on that one, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Allenson?
I just wanted to point out a couple of things. And again, it's not really questions. It's not so much as kind of in support and then also not in support. So when we talk about the great paper debate that we have in Wallingford, there's definitely cost associated with paper and mailing and things like that. But when you look at the people who, like myself, who do a lot of electronic bill pay, we also use electronic banking, and we don't use stamps. So, like, I didn't even have a checkbook until I had to start writing checks for Rotary. But I send everything from my bank's electronic bill pay, and that's on them to stamp it, and it's free to me. So, just pointing out kind of one thing. Another thing is we do have some ability to pay electronically, and it's at the cost of the user. I personally have used it quite a few times, and for the convenience of knowing my money is where it is, I do appreciate that availability. And then just on the converse, one more thing. Emails change a lot. I know when I change my name, I change my email, and sometimes I get a little email exhaustion, stuff goes to the junk filter. So I do think that one major positive to the paper debate that we have here is the amount of things that go out sometimes with our taxes, electric bills, et cetera. We are able to know that we're reaching the households and businesses in Wallingford because we send a paper copy of everything to them. And we've taken advantage of this on many of our Board of Ed campaigns and for other things that involve the electrical. And that's really all. It's not really a question so much as like pointing out to maybe my fellow counselors, but more so also to the public as we continue to have this debate about how Wallingford is so behind and all of this. There are positives and negatives to everything. Obviously, we know that there's wastage with paper and there's storage when we have paper, but you know, sometimes you have to look at some of the positives as well. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Counselor Carmody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After this conversation, I think I would be remiss not to mention how, and I guess this point has been belabored over time, but I would be remiss to not point out that ultimately direct deposit for our employees would be more sufficient and less costly to the town of Wallingford. And so I hope that's something that we can eventually bring up once again. I know it's a conversation that we have had over and over and over again over the course of the years, but it's something that I think is long overdue. I'm not familiar with a corporation or another municipality who doesn't have direct deposits for their employees. And so in terms of efficiency and cost savings, particularly when it comes to paper, I think that's something that should be looked into.
Mr. Chairman, just to address that, and I think everyone knows, we are very open to that, but all of the bargaining units must agree with it. We're not going to have some doing one way and some doing another. We want a bi-monthly, 2-week pay. I don't think any major corporation is putting out checks weekly. So we need to have everyone on board to be a bi-weekly payment, and that can be direct deposit, but the process has to be approved by all of the bargaining units. We can't do it unilaterally.
Mr. Chairman, that's a fair point. I don't know what efforts have been made to get every bargaining unit onto the same page so that this could occur.
Yeah, that's a part of the negotiation. Every negotiation, I think we've at this point, I think most are allowing it. There are several that so far have not agreed to it.
And just out of my naivety, what would happen if we didn't have all bargaining units participate and only some?
Well, then we would continue with, right now we have, I believe it's, well, this probably wouldn't change. There are 4 different pay weeks. And so it's a complicated, very complicated payroll situation. If we weren't going, so we'd have some people on a 2-week direct deposit pay, and some of those won't want the direct deposit, so we'll still have to issue a check. You can't require that they all have direct deposit. So some will be doing, so some will be on a 2-week payment, and then others would still be on a weekly. And it just becomes ever more unmanageable.
Sure. I mean, I've been employed by the federal government, the state government, and now in the private sector, and I have not heard of the option to not have direct deposit. So that's my point, and I hope we'd look a little bit more seriously into this.
I can tell you, people can refuse direct deposit, and you still have to pay them under labor law.
I don't disagree, but I do think that most people in this day and age would like direct deposit.
If I could just make one comment.
That still leaves people who don't, and that's the issue.
And I'm not saying that they can't. I'm just saying the vast majority do want it, and I think those people should be afforded that option.
As we currently operate on a weekly payroll, it is impossible for us to implement direct deposit. Just for this week alone, with the holiday coming in, we would have had to have the payroll done and called in, because there's a 2-day lag. You have to have it ready 2 days before it goes into the employees' accounts. And we're not even going to get, because the holiday's on a Friday, people are going to be coming in giving us the timesheets to enter on Monday.
Fair enough. I don't know how everyone else in the world is capable of doing this other than the town of Wallingford.
We could do it, but it's a HR function to get the unions to allow us to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How's your first budget going? It's good. My question was also about the microfilming, but I think you answered it, and I understand now what it is. I think it's just the terminology, I think, is kind of antiquated, so I'm picturing, like the newspapers and the old, and the canisters of the library.
Well, just to actually, for archiving information, microfiche or the paper is the only thing acceptable. Electronic, with whether it's whatever you want to talk about else, is not recognized by the state of Connecticut.
Oh, so it is actually
Because
microfilm?
it degrades. Microfiche is regarded as not degrading, and paper doesn't degrade. But all of these others degrade because they're electronic messaging that over a period of time, it's magnetism, it's electricity, and it degrades. So it won't last as an archival issue for the length of time that they want to have it covered. So my understanding from the state of Connecticut is if you have to archive, it's either keeping the records or microfiche.
But my understanding is that the service we use does both, right?
I believe it does both, but for what we're using it for, 7 years after audit's complete, we don't have to keep a record of it anyway.
Yeah. So so you're scanning it, and then it's like it's in a cloud, or they're keeping.
We get it sent out, they returned it to me on a flash drive. The first thing I did was load it to our networks that gets backed up, so we have it in 2 different places. So, if anything happened to the server, we have a backup copy of it.
And is that stored off-site, the backup copy, or? I'm just thinking, like, God forbid, of a fire or, some sort of a.
It's going to be stored off-site in a fireproof thing.
Okay, great. Is there an option for them to store things like in the cloud or like some sort of off-site, or is that not something that you want to change at this point?
I don't want to get into a cloud conversation right now.
Okay, that's fine. I understand. I'm just thinking like secure, just for, that's fine, I understand. Yeah, that was my only question. I just wanted to make sure I knew what that line was. And then, I just want to thank you too for your, since you've been here, you've given very succinct, clear answers, and I appreciate it. So thank you. Thanks for all your work with this.
Well, thank you.
On to debt. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to, not to belabor, but to go back to the direct deposit thing, why can't we do the pensioners?
Because it has to be uniform. It has to be uniform. If you start allowing some to do something and not others, it has to be uniform for our own purposes as well as equal treatment to everyone else.
So
We'll have pensioners who probably will not accept. I mean, just for example, the federal government, Social Security, sought to make that all direct deposit. They abandoned the process because there were so many people in the United States who didn't have a bank account that they couldn't require it all be direct deposit. So I'm just saying there's a range of human behavior, and what are you going to do with the ones who don't want to have a direct deposit? So we can implement, but at least with the direct deposit, we'll get a bi-weekly check, payment, whatever, and that's 50% of the transaction fees. The bank transaction fees go with how many times you're issuing whatever the check might be. So, but I think we need to be even across the board, and that means everyone has to agree to this. Now, will everyone want it? No, but at least we're at a point then that it's a standard for everyone.
But I'm just trying to, because I heard that all of the collective bargaining agreements have to come into line before we could do this. So am I to understand that if all the collective bargaining agreements come into line, unless 100% of them want it, that we're not going to do this? Because the
No,
pensioners is something separate, right?
No, at the point all collective bargaining units can go to the biweekly. Some will want the direct deposit, some won't, but it will be a biweekly check. Okay? That's where we want to go because it will simplify payroll, it will simplify a lot of things. That's the real issue for us, simplifying the transaction issue. Those who want direct deposit can have it. Those who don't will have to run the same system we do now, except it'll be a biweekly check and not a weekly.
Okay, but specifically with regard to the pensioners, that's all I'm asking about. Is there something that precludes us from going to them and saying, hey, if you want direct deposit, we'll switch to a monthly? Is there something that precludes that? And you give them the option?
I don't know, how frequently do those checks go out?
Pension's done monthly.
They are or not?
They are currently.
Okay. So is there something that precludes us from, that's not unmanageable, I don't think, from a logistical standpoint internally, from just offering something like that to the pensioners?
Policy says no, and I think that does affect collective bargaining, and we will just damage our position in collective bargaining.
So I'm just trying to figure out the policy of the agreement to pay the pensioners, or is there some other?
The policy over how the town is arguing the issue, it has to be uniform, and at that point, it's available to everyone.
Okay, with that in mind, if we opened it up to the pensioners on a monthly basis, wouldn't it be of benefit to the town to open up that to the other employees of the town that have already agreed to direct deposit through their collective bargaining agreement? And then, if people are being paid monthly, I would think that's of benefit to the town based upon the hurdles that I've heard about here tonight. So why not just do something like that? And then, it's sort of like if you build it, they will come. Then the other collective bargaining agreements.
Collective bargaining does not work that way.
Okay, I'll drop it once again for now. 10 years doing this. But anyway, there was another issue that you were talking, the microfiche. I'm trying to figure out, so Tim, you said that the company sends you a flash drive, but then I heard that we do microfiche. So which one is it?
So I didn't get microfiche so I've only done this once, so they did not provide microfiche for it. But for our archival invoices, we don't need to keep that in perpetuity. If some of the other departments, like the building department, when they're scanning out their records, they would need that on microfiche.
Okay, so it's merely records that it's anticipated we're going to keep generally forever.
Yes.
That we have to microfiche.
Correct.
But your stuff, you don't.
So our invoices, I believe it's either 5 or 7 years after the audit has been complete, we can completely get rid of. We have to write a letter to the state saying we want to get rid of them, and they'll approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Tata.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in regards to the direct deposit, I do payroll, weekly payroll for one company now. Our business now used to be 2 companies, up to 45 employees each week, some full-time, some part-time, hourly salary, non-exempt, exempt, so a whole range of different situations. And we've just given them the option. So they have the option of direct deposit or the option of a paper check. And I would say probably 2/3 choose direct deposit, and the other third is our paper checks. Maybe a little bit even higher than that towards the direct deposit. But they just have the option, and I know you have internal systems. I've done payroll internally and through an outside system. But once I enter that in, what their option is, there's nothing, I don't see any difference in processing payroll or how it happens, except for that the ones who are direct deposit, I don't have to enter individual checks each month with the reconciliation. So it does save some time there to have the direct deposit, but, you know, the stubs come in and some people just have a stub because they have the direct deposit, or some have a paper check, but I make sure they're all there. There's also the option to go completely paperless and they just get their stubs online if they have direct deposit. So you know, I understand the biweekly and why that would be a huge, something that you are really looking for. But I'm hopeful that the direct deposit, I think, is maybe not quite as complicated as maybe it sounds. I think it's fairly easy nowadays, and it will cut down on some reconciliation time, also with the amount of checks that you're sending out. Thank you.
One of the main issues is our town hall employees, the work week is Thursday to Wednesday, and then you get your check the following Thursday, so we're 1 week in arrears. The police department is Sunday to Sunday. Water is a different one. Electric's a different one. So unless everybody's synced on the same pay week, it's almost, it would be impossible for us. So we don't, when we come in, we can have our town payroll done until water, sewer, and electric enter theirs, which they can't even start entering until Monday, creates the problem. So it's the weekly doing of the payroll, and then you throw a holiday in, and it's just not going to get done.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
I
and
didn't realize that. Yeah,
It's, you know, as Jim Bowes used to always say, our payroll people, it's like sausage grinders, you know. They hand out the checks on Thursday, they get the time cards, and just crank away till the next week.
Yeah, that's tough. Now, you do, does your department do payroll for all the departments except for Board of Ed?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So to get them all on the same schedule, that's what the mayor's looking for, to get that bi-weekly, so they all have to agree to get. So is that something that we're actively seeking? Because when we have the union contracts, I haven't really heard it come up too much, but is that something that, Mr. Mayor, like we could try to negotiate to say, if you go to the bi-weekly, we can offer direct deposit? Is that?
No, I don't think we're talking about changing the work weeks. We're just trying to get the ability to be able to cut in half the number of times they're paid in a year. Okay. And to change the work weeks, I think would require a lot more.
If we go bi-weekly, then the work weeks, we can still live with that, because you have the 2-week time period to get it done.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. That makes, I have more appreciation for what you do. That sounds terrible to me. So they're basically just doing payroll functions every single day, depending on which work week is ending which day. It's just a constant.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And then once a month, they have to get a pension payroll done in the middle of it.
Okay.
There were interesting times during all the COVID and trying to get paychecks.
I'm sure, yep. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Laffin.
Yeah, I was going to say this, Mr. Senator basically said, this is like an office operations logistics thing primarily, and we might not understand it, but, you know, I used to work with some of these guys and whatnot, like, they want a weekly paycheck. They don't want a bi-weekly, like, and then they want it on paper on top of that. Like, it's like, we don't understand it because it makes more sense to us, or I'm comfortable this way. Some of them just, they don't, so they say no. But, so no, I appreciate, I know I've done payroll as well, and we had a combination. And we had our employees too, that it was, nope, they needed paper, and every week. So, no, thank you.
Councilor Carmody. I did see your hand, right?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I had the privilege of working in this building 10 years ago as registrar of voters, and we received our paper paycheck once a week. But I can't tell you how many people throughout this building complained that they were not able to receive direct deposit, including teachers at that time. I don't know if that's changed for teachers. But, you know, on a Thursday afternoon, you could see the line out the door over at the credit union across the street because everyone had to leave and deposit their check physically. That to me just seems just so antiquated. And to other points that were made, like I had mentioned, I worked for the state of Connecticut for over 5 years, and there are a huge number of bargaining units with the state. And I don't know where their timeline falls for who gets paid when or what, but for somehow the state of Connecticut with over 50,000 employees, they were able to figure something out to make it work for them. And so I don't know why that's not taking place here.
Mr. Chairman, at the state of Connecticut, they can pass a state law that says, oh, this is the way you're going to handle it, and it isn't negotiated. But we are forced to negotiate it, and you end up with inability to get everyone to agree. But literally, the state, there's no one can countermand what the legislature says. So if there's a problem with something, you go to the legislature, and if they pass the law, that solves the problem.
To answer your question, the teachers do have direct deposit.
They do, okay. That was my question, yeah, thank you.
And I believe the state does not pay weekly. The weekly payroll is the real stick in the mud here.
Okay, well, I don't know what effort's being made to get everyone on a bi-weekly payroll here in Wallingford, but I think that would be a wise move, and I think it would probably save money in the long run.
All right. I think we're set here. Let's talk about debt service, page 22.
Okay. So your binders should have the amortization schedules behind the sheet that shows. So we did issue bonds in August, which is causing the increase in principal and interest. The new debt financing line, that's in case we need to issue, I don't know when the next time we're going to issue bonds, but if it's going to be next fiscal year, that's what that money's for.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim, looking at line 8582, it doesn't appear that anything's been expended in that line. What's going on there?
In the current year?
Yes, sir.
Correct. So I will have to, we will transfer out. I'm going to have to true up the interest payments in the current year, because when we issued debt in this year, so I'll be moving money from that new debt financing line to interest.
Okay.
But you are correct. So far, nothing's been spent out of that.
And when does that happen?
That will happen probably, before year end, but soon. Like I noticed recently when I was looking at the reports that we're overspent in that line item in interest. So I am going to have to come for a transfer.
Okay. Any idea how much? Or
I believe it was, it is not much, but it will just be from one line to the other.
So, not to get controversial, we had a discussion at our meeting Tuesday night about the community pool. And whether...
Really hoping to get through this night without going back there, but...
Well, I'm looking at these numbers, what we pay to borrow money, and I know the rate is low. But when you've got cash in hand and you're just saying, hey, let's just borrow it and pay interest, I'm looking at the dynamics. So if we were to spend, don't want to scare anybody, $8 million on a pool out of reserves, that's one way. Another way is to bond it. So, you know these numbers a lot better than I do. If we bonded $8 million, generally how much would we pay over the life of the bonds?
You pay the $8 million in principal, and since when the Federal Reserve just increased that little bump, the market for municipal bonding went. So in August, we got around 1%. We're looking at 2.5 right now. Those are the deals when I talked to our advisor on bonding is where we would be. But I can do the math for you. If you
So
just
the
give me a
interest
second.
on bonding has gone up more than doubles.
So that's what the current market is, but it depends when you go out.
Sure.
I mean, 2% is still not terrible.
You said 2.5?
Let's use 2.
Okay, that's fine.
On the fly, I'm getting probably about $160,000 in interest, but I would rather be able to work through the math at my computer and get back to you.
Yeah, no, I'm generally the same. So it's $160,000 over the 20 years
Yes.
of the bonding?
Well, I know I would be $160,000 a year.
Okay, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I thought it
Yeah.
was. So if I take that, so that's 1.6 million on top of the principal.
Well, we would probably bond 20 years, so it's almost, you're probably looking at 3 million in interest.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Counselor Allenson?
So I was watching the Board of Ed budgets and I saw, and granted, I know we're not there yet, so we are where we are, but this was something that came up. It looks like per this, we've bonded the Lyman Hall track and field. Why are we not able to bond the Sheehan track and field?
That is an option. They didn't ask for that in their summary. They put it in their operations.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in regards to the pool bonding, Councilor Fishbein, I remember with the prior pool project, when I think it came, the pool itself was 7.4, and I remember asking Mr. Bose how much it would be bonded, and I believe it was 9.5, which sounds like your calculation with the 8 million, it sounds about right. The interest rates are probably a little bit lower then. But I just, for a reference point, I do remember, because I remember being up here and saying, being at home on the screen saying, it's not a $7.4 million pool, it's a $9.5 million pool. So I remember it was about 2 million at that point. So, not to harp on it, but that's why I was thinking if we could use ARPA, then we can save the 2.5 million, but we don't need to go there again tonight. Thank you.
When somebody says ARPA, it turns into 3 hours. Anyone else? That's it. We're done for tonight. We're
Thank you.
adjourned.